Store-bought tomatoes are basically red water balloons with zero flavour. But here's the thing. You don't need a backyard to grow the real deal. I'm going to show you the actual secrets to growing massive, juicy tomatoes in pots and buckets that most gardeners never talk about. These techniques work whether you've got a balcony, patio, or just a sunny corner. And honestly, some of them might surprise you. Container size matters. Here's where most container tomato growers fail before they even start. They grab whatever pot looks cute at the garden centre and wonder why their plants struggle. Container size is the single biggest factor that determines whether you'll harvest a handful of sad tomatoes or bushels of beautiful fruit all summer long. The minimum you want for any tomato is 5 gallons, and that's really pushing it for anything except compact determinate varieties. If you're growing those big, indeterminate beefsteak types that vine like crazy, you need at least 15 to 20 gallons. I know that sounds massive, but think about it this way. Tomatoes are huge plants with enormous root systems, and in a container, they can't just send roots out further to find what they need. Now let's talk about fabric pots versus plastic, because this matters more than you'd think. Fabric pots do something called air pruning, where the roots hit the breathable sides, sense air, and stop growing in that direction. Instead of circling around and getting root bound like they do in plastic, they branch out and create this dense network of feeder roots. More roots means more water uptake, more nutrients, and bigger harvests. Plastic pots aren't terrible, especially black ones in cooler climates since they hold heat and warm the soil in spring. But here's the catch. Those same black pots can cook your roots in summer. You'll need to shade them with cloth or towels if temperatures spike. Fabric pots breathe and regulate temperature naturally, which is why I've switched almost entirely to them. Whatever container you choose, drill drainage holes if there aren't any. Tomatoes hate wet feet, and standing water is a death sentence. Also, put your pot exactly where you want it before filling it with soil, because once it's loaded, you're not moving that thing without a forklift. Soil secret. Pop quiz. Can you just fill your container with dirt from the garden? Absolutely not. And here's why that'll kill your tomato dreams faster than a late frost. Garden soil is too heavy and compacts hard in containers. It suffocates roots by cutting off oxygen, drains poorly, and worst of all, it can carry diseases that tomatoes are super susceptible to. One of the biggest advantages of container growing is starting with clean soil, so don't blow it by scooping from your yard. You need premium potting mix, the light, fluffy stuff that's specifically formulated for containers. Good potting soil stays airy even when wet, retains moisture without turning into a swamp, and drains excess water freely. It's usually made from things like peat moss or coconut coir, compost and perlite, or vermiculite for drainage. Want to make your own and save some money? Mix 50% coconut fibre with 50% compost, then add a handful of perlite to keep it loose. This combination gives you the organic matter tomatoes crave while maintaining that critical drainage and aeration. If you're using straight compost, definitely add extra perlite because pure compost can get dense. Here's something most guides won't tell you. Don't skimp on soil quality. I've seen people spend $50 on a fancy heirloom tomato plant and then fill the pot with cheap, heavy soil that's basically sawdust and sand. Your soil is literally feeding your plant for months, so this is not the place to cut corners. The soil should fill your container to about 1 or 2 inches below the rim. This leaves room for mulch later and prevents water from immediately running off the top. Trust me, starting with the right soil makes everything else easier. Watering, feeding, disease prevention, all of it. Planting deep. This technique alone will transform your container tomatoes, and it's something I do with every single plant I grow. You're going to bury the stem way deeper than it was growing in its starter pot. And yes, this feels completely wrong at first. Tomatoes have this incredible ability that most plants don't. They can grow roots all along their stems wherever they touch soil. Those little bumps and hairs you see on the stem, those are adventitious roots just waiting to develop. By burying a good portion of the stem, you're basically tripling or quadrupling the root system overnight. Here's how to do it. Fill your container about 1/3 full with potting soil, then gently pinch or snip off the lowest sets of leaves on your tomato plant. You want to remove leaves on the bottom third to half of the stem. Don't be shy about this. Those leaves would just rot underground anyway. Now place the plant in the container so that bare stem is sitting in the soil and fill around it until you're up to where the remaining leaves start. You should only see the top leafy portion above the soil line. The entire buried stem will develop roots within a week or two, and this massive root system means your plant can access way more water and nutrients. Some people worry about burying the plant this deep, thinking it'll stress it out or cause rot. In my experience, it's the opposite. These deeply planted tomatoes establish faster, grow more vigorously, and handle heat stress better than shallow planted ones. The bigger root system is like giving your plant a superpower. One quick note, always leave at least 3 or 4 sets of leaves above the soil. Your plant still needs to photosynthesize while it's building all those new roots underground. Hidden nutrient boosters. Before you finish filling that pot with soil, we need to talk about the secret amendments that prevent the most common container tomato problems. These aren't optional extras, they're insurance policies against disasters like blossom end rot and weak fruit production. First up is calcium, and here's where the internet gets weird. Everyone says crush up eggshells and throw them in, but honestly, eggshells take forever to break down. By the time your plant can actually use that calcium, the season's basically over. I use gypsum instead, about half a cup for a large container, mixed into that bottom third of soil. It's cheap, readily available, and actually works because tomatoes can access it immediately. Why does calcium matter so much? Blossom end rot, that nasty black mushy spot on the bottom of tomatoes, happens when plants can't get enough calcium to the developing fruit. In-ground gardens usually have plenty, but in containers, we need to add it. Even if there's calcium in the soil, inconsistent watering prevents the plant from uptaking it, so we're covering our bases here. Next is magnesium, which tomatoes need for serious fruit production. Epsom salts are actually useful here, and this is literally the only time I recommend them in the garden, despite what Pinterest says. 1 tablespoon mixed into the planting hole gives your tomato a magnesium boost without going overboard. The final secret weapon is rock phosphate. This is a slow-release source of phosphorus, that middle number on fertilizer bags, which drives root development and flowering. What makes rock phosphate perfect for containers is that it releases gradually over months, so it won't leach out the bottom every time you water. Put a handful right in the planting hole so those new roots grow directly into it. Mix these amendments into your soil before planting, and you've just eliminated 3 of the most frustrating container tomato problems before they start. Water-absorbing polymers. Okay, this one sounds strange, but stick with me because it's brilliant. You know what's inside a diaper that makes it absorb so much liquid? Water-absorbing polymers, and you can buy these same crystals for your garden, and they're a total game changer for container tomatoes. These polymers are non-toxic crystals that hold hundreds of times their weight in water. When you mix them into your potting soil, they create little moisture reservoirs throughout the container. During the day, when your tomato is sucking up water like crazy, these crystals slowly release moisture to the roots, which means your plant isn't cycling between bone dry and soaking wet. Here's how to use them correctly. You need to pre-moisten the polymers before mixing them into soil. If you add them dry, they'll swell up unevenly and create weird pockets. Follow the package directions, let them absorb water until they look like little gel beads, then mix them into your pre-moistened potting soil before filling the container. Why does this matter so much for tomatoes? Inconsistent watering is the #1 cause of problems like fruit cracking, blossom end rot, and stress-related pest issues. In containers, soil dries out way faster than in-ground beds, especially during peak summer heat. You might be watering daily and still struggling to keep moisture consistent. The polymers act as a buffer, smoothing out those moisture swings and giving you some breathing room between waterings. This is especially helpful if you travel, work long hours, or live somewhere with scorching summers. I found that containers with polymers can sometimes go an extra day between waterings compared to those without. Don't go overboard though. Follow the recommended amounts on the package. Too many polymers can actually make the soil too water retentive and cause root issues. We want moist, not soggy. Watering technique. Let's get real about watering because this is where container tomato growing gets tricky. Your plants need consistent moisture, but what does that actually mean in practice? It's not about watering on a schedule, it's about reading your soil. The finger test is your best friend here. Stick your finger into the soil about 2 to 3 inches deep. If it feels moist, don't water. If it's dry, it's time for a drink. The surface might look bone dry and crusty, but underneath could still be damp, so trust your finger, not your eyes. When you do water, water deeply. I'm talking about a thorough soaking, where water runs freely out the drainage holes at the bottom. This encourages roots to grow deep, instead of staying shallow near the surface. Shallow, frequent watering creates weak root systems that can't handle stress. Deep watering less often builds resilient plants that can tolerate a hot afternoon if you're not around. Here's what happens when watering gets inconsistent. The tomatoes themselves physically shrink when the plant is dry, then when you finally water, they swell up rapidly. That sudden expansion cracks the skin, just like stretch marks. Same thing with blossom end rot. The plant can't transport calcium without adequate water, even if there's plenty of calcium in the soil. Containers dry out faster than ground soil for obvious reasons. They're exposed to air on all sides, and there's a limited volume of soil to hold moisture. In summer heat, you might need to water daily, or even twice daily for large plants in smaller pots. This is normal, not a sign you're doing something wrong. Always water at the base of the plant, not overhead on the leaves. Wet foliage invites disease, and you want all that water going to the roots anyway. A watering can or hose with a gentle flow works better than a hard spray. Drop a comment and tell me which container size you're using for your tomatoes this year. Support systems. Here's a mistake I see all the time. People wait until their tomato plant is flopping over before they try to add support, and by then it's nearly impossible to wrangle those vines without breaking branches. You need to install support at planting time, period. For determinate tomatoes, those compact bush types that stop growing at a certain height, you can get away with a standard tomato cage. But here's a trick that actually works better. Flip the cage upside down, nestle the circular part into the soil, and zip tie the legs together at the top. This creates a sturdy support that won't tip over when the plant gets heavy with fruit. Indeterminate tomatoes are a different beast because they just keep growing and growing. Those flimsy wire cones from the garden centre are a joke for these monsters. I've had the best luck with Texas tomato cages. They're tall, made from heavy gauge steel, and actually hold up a 7-foot vine loaded with tomatoes. Another excellent option is the string method if you've got something overhead to tie to. Run a string from above down to the soil, anchor it with a landscape staple, and wrap the growing vine around the string as it grows. When the plant reaches the top, unhook the string, lower it one wrap, and rehook it. The vine gets longer but not taller, and you can keep harvesting at a comfortable height. For containers specifically, tomato ladders work great because they're essentially very tall stakes that you can extend as the plant grows. Square folding cages are another solid choice that store flat in the off-season. Whatever you choose, put a bamboo stake right next to the main stem at planting time. Tie the stem loosely to this stake to keep it growing straight up. Even if you're using another support system later, this initial stake prevents that early flop over that's so common with young transplants. Fertilizing schedule. Even though we loaded the planting hole with amendments, your tomato will burn through those nutrients faster than you think. Container soil has a limited supply, and every time you water, you're literally washing nutrients out the drainage holes. This is why fertilizing throughout the season isn't optional. It's required. At planting time, I add about half a cup of a balanced organic fertilizer mixed into the soil. Then I wait about 2 weeks before feeding again, giving the plant time to establish its roots. Too much fertilizer too early just leaches away before the plant can use it. Once established, I switch to liquid fertilizer every 2 to 3 weeks. Some people do weekly half-strength feedings, which works too. It's really about keeping a steady supply of nutrients available. Early in the season, I use something higher in nitrogen to build strong stems and lush foliage. That's the first number on fertilizer labels. When flowers start appearing, it's time to switch gears. Now, you want fertilizer higher in phosphorus and potassium, those second and third numbers. Phosphorus drives flower and fruit production, while potassium improves fruit quality and disease resistance. Keep feeding every 2 to 3 weeks through the fruiting period. Here's when to stop. Once your tomatoes reach about half their final size, cut off the fertilizer completely. Too much feeding late in the game affects flavor and texture. Let those fruits ripen with what they've already got. One more thing about container feeding, you can't just eyeball it and hope for the best, like you might in a garden bed. Follow package directions carefully because over-fertilizing leads to aphid infestations, excessive leafy growth with no fruit, and can even burn roots in the confined space of a container. Fish emulsion and seaweed-based fertilizers work exceptionally well for tomatoes, giving them a broad spectrum of nutrients and minerals that synthetic fertilizers miss. The real secret to container tomatoes isn't one magic trick, it's getting all these pieces right together. Big enough containers, quality soil, deep planting, smart amendments, consistent watering, and steady feeding create the perfect environment for explosive growth. These techniques level the playing field so anyone can grow incredible tomatoes, regardless of space.
If you found value in this video, you're going to love this next one.